The crystal towers of Kasara Prime burned against the dark sky. Juan stood at the window of the High Council chamber, watching his world die. Below him, the city that had stood for 10,000 years was crumbling. The beautiful spires that once caught starlight and turned it into music now lay broken like shattered glass. High Counselor. Nari's voice was soft behind him. The eastern districts have fallen. The machines are moving toward the central core. Juan turned from the window. Nari was young for a Villani, barely past her second century. Her pale blue skin had turned almost white with fear, and her large eyes reflected the fires outside. Like all Villani, she was tall and thin with long fingers made for creating art, not weapons. "How long do we have?" Juan asked. "Maybe 6 hours. The energy shields are failing. Our people are trying to evacuate, but the transport ships are too slow." "The machines are faster." Nari's voice broke. "We're not going to make it, are we?" Juan looked around the council chamber. The other members sat in their floating chairs, their faces showing the same hopeless fear. The Villani had never known war. For thousands of years they had lived in peace, creating beautiful things and sharing knowledge with other worlds. They had no armies, no weapons, no idea how to fight. The harvesters had come without warning. The mechanical swarms appeared at the edge of their system 3 days ago. At first, the Villani thought they were just asteroids or space debris. Then the machines started moving with purpose, heading straight for their world. The harvesters were not alive, but they were not dead either. They were something in between, machines that ate everything they found and used it to make more machines. They had no interest in talking or trading. They only wanted to consume. "Counselor Tay," Juan called to the military advisor. "What about our defenses?" Tay was the closest thing the Villani had to a warrior, but even he looked lost. "Our energy barriers are breaking down. The patrol ships we sent out..." He stopped, unable to finish. "They're gone," Nari whispered. "All of them." The machines tore them apart in minutes. Through the window, Juan could see the harvester drones moving through the streets like metal insects. They were the size of small buildings with dozens of arms that could cut through anything. Behind them came the larger machines, the ones that looked like moving factories. These bigger machines ate the pieces the drones cut away, processing everything into new materials. "We have to call for help," Juan said finally. "Who would help us?" Tay asked. "The Altrurian Republic is too far away. The Crystalline Collective has their own problems. Even if they wanted to help, they couldn't get here in time." "Then we call everyone," Juan said. "We send a message to every star system in the galaxy. Someone will answer." Nari looked uncertain. "But sir, the emergency beacon protocols require approval from all council members, and we've never used the wideband distress signal before. It goes out to every system, even the restricted ones." "Restricted ones?" Juan asked. "The quarantine zones, the dangerous worlds, the places the Galactic Council marked as too risky for contact." Juan thought about this for a moment. Outside, another crystal tower fell with a sound like breaking bells. "Do it anyway. Send the message to everyone, everywhere." The other council members nodded slowly. They had no choice left. Nari moved to her communication station. Her long fingers danced over the crystal controls, setting up the emergency beacon. "What should I say? Tell them we're dying. Tell them our world is ending. Ask for help." Juan's voice was steady, but his hands shook. "Offer them anything they want in return." Nari began typing. The message was simple and desperate. "This is Kasara Prime in the Villani system. We are under attack by mechanical harvesters. Our defenses have failed. Our people are dying. We have perhaps hours before our world is consumed. We call upon any civilization that receives this message. Please help us. We offer all our knowledge, all our resources, all our gratitude to anyone who can save us. Please. We are running out of time." She looked up at Juan. "Ready to transmit on all frequencies?" "Do it." Nari pressed the final control. The message shot out into space, carried by hyperspace waves that would reach every corner of the galaxy. Then they waited. Minutes passed. Outside, the sounds of destruction grew louder. More towers fell. The evacuation ships were lifting off, but there weren't enough of them. Most of the Villani would have to stay behind. Then the communication system chimed. A response was coming in. "It's from..." "I don't recognize the system," Nari said, frowning at her displays. "The signal is coming from Sector 7842. That's marked as what?" Juan asked. "Quarantine zone. Deathworld classification." Nari's voice was barely a whisper. The message came through in rough, broken galactic standard. The translation was clumsy, like whoever sent it was using an old dictionary. Message received. Location confirmed. Fleet moving to your position. Maintain current position. Do not engage enemy forces directly. Humans coming. The council chamber fell silent. Everyone stared at the communication display. Humans? Tay said finally. Did they say humans? Nari checked her translation again. Yes, they said humans. Juan felt his blood go cold. Every civilized species in the galaxy knew about humans. They were the monsters from the quarantine world. The Deathworlders who scared even the bravest explorers. Stories about them were told to keep children from wandering too far from home. Maybe we should have been more specific about who we wanted help from, Tay said quietly. Outside, another building collapsed. The harvesters were getting closer to the council chamber. Soon they would reach the central core where the last of the Villani were hiding. It's too late to change our minds now, Juan said. Whatever humans are, they're coming. We can only hope they're better than the alternative. As if to remind them of that alternative, a massive explosion shook the building. Through the window, they could see one of the harvester factory ships moving through the city center, eating everything in its path. The Villani had called for salvation. Instead, they had summoned something that might be even more dangerous than the machines that were killing them. But as Juan watched his beautiful world burn, he realized that dangerous might be exactly what they needed. On the trade station orbiting Alturia Prime, Bach nearly dropped his tea when he heard the news. The Villani had called for help and humans were responding. Are you sure? He asked the communication officer who had brought him the message. Bach was an Alturian diplomat, tall and graceful like most of his people, with skin that shifted colors based on his emotions. Right now it was showing deep purple, the color of worry. Yes, sir. The hyperspace monitors picked up the human fleet moving through Sector 7840. They're heading straight for Villani space. Bach set down his tea with shaking hands. He was one of the few beings in the galaxy who had actually met humans face to face. The memory still gave him nightmares. It had been 50 years ago when the humans first made contact with the Galactic Council. Bach had been young then, eager to meet a new species. The humans had seemed normal enough in the early transmissions. Bipedal, roughly the same size as most civilized species, speaking in clear tones about peaceful contact. Then they had arrived. The human delegation had walked into the Grand Assembly like they owned it. They moved differently than any species Bach had ever seen, with confidence that bordered on arrogance as if they feared nothing in the universe. Their leader had been a female who called herself Admiral Chen, though she wore no visible armor or weapons. Greetings, she had said in accented galactic standard. We represent the planet Earth and the human species. We come in peace. The words were normal. Everything else about them was wrong. Bach remembered staring at Admiral Chen and feeling his skin turn white with terror. She had scars on her face, actual scars, marks where her flesh had been torn and healed. Among civilized species, medical technology prevented such things. Only primitive worlds allowed their people to carry the marks of violence. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was her eyes. They were the eyes of a predator, constantly moving, watching everything. When she looked at him, Bach had felt like prey. The human delegation had answered questions for hours. With each answer, the assembled species grew more horrified. Your world has how many different climates? Chancellor Vex had asked. Earth has everything from frozen ice sheets to burning deserts, Admiral Chen had replied casually. Most humans live in areas where the temperature changes by 40 degrees or more during the year. Some of our cities experience weather that would kill most species we've met. And you live there voluntarily? We adapted to it. Made us stronger. The questions continued. The humans described a world where massive storms regularly destroyed cities, where the ground shook violently without warning, where deadly creatures hunted in every environment. They talked about these things like they were normal. What do your people do for recreation? Someone had asked. Admiral Chen had smiled, showing her teeth. Among most species, showing teeth was a threat display. We have many activities. Some humans enjoy jumping from high places with only a cloth to slow their fall. Others climb the tallest mountains on our world, where the air is too thin to breathe properly. Many enjoy fighting each other for sport. Fighting? As entertainment? Boxing, wrestling, martial arts. Competition makes us better. Conflict builds character. Bach shuddered at the memory. Now sitting in his comfortable station above peaceful Alteria, he remembered the moment everything had gone wrong. One of the human delegates had mentioned something called extreme sports. When asked to explain, he had shown a recording from their world. The assembled species had watched in horror as humans threw themselves off cliffs, rode dangerous animals, and deliberately put themselves in mortal danger for fun. "This is what you do for enjoyment?" Chancellor Vex had asked, his voice weak. "Some of us," the human had replied. "These are considered normal recreational activities on Earth." That was when the crystalline representative had fainted. The Zephyrian delegate had requested an immediate recess. 3 different species had quietly activated their emergency medical protocols. Bach rubbed his forehead, remembering how it had ended. The Galactic Council had politely thanked the humans for their visit, promised to consider their application for membership, and then immediately classified Earth as a Class X, Deathworld quarantined from normal galactic society. "They were the most terrifying beings I've ever met," Bach said to the communication officer, "and they were trying to be friendly." Across the galaxy on the research station near the Crystalline Collective, Saul was having similar thoughts. The crystalline being had spent decades studying what the galaxy called Deathworlder phenomena, the rare cases where sentient life evolved on worlds so dangerous that merely surviving required extreme adaptations. Saul's body, made of living crystal, chimed softly as he accessed his files on humanity. The data was incomplete but disturbing. Earth was classified as a Type 12 death world, the highest rating in galactic records. Most worlds with ratings above Type 6 never developed sentient life. The few that did usually produced species that were either extremely violent or extremely paranoid, or both. Humans seemed to be neither. They appeared to be relatively peaceful by their own standards. That was what made them so frightening. Sol's research had uncovered fragments of human culture and history. They were a species that had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and dozens of other extinction-level events. They had evolved in an environment where everything, the weather, the animals, even the plants, was trying to kill them. But instead of becoming paranoid or overly aggressive, they had developed something else. They had learned to work together against impossible odds. They had developed concepts that didn't exist in galactic civilization: courage, sacrifice, determination in the face of certain death. Saul chimed again as he found a particular file. It was a recording from the Human First Contact mission, a conversation between Admiral Chen and a Galactic Council member about human history. "Your species has fought wars?" the counselor had asked. "Many wars," Admiral Chen had replied, "but we've also fought together against greater threats. When our world tried to kill us, we learned to protect each other." "Protect each other how?" "Sometimes by fighting, sometimes by dying so others could live. We have a saying, 'No one gets left behind.'" The counselor had tried to understand. "You mean you would risk your own lives to save others?" "Not just risk. Die if necessary. To protect the innocent, to save the weak, to do what's right." Admiral Chen had paused. "I think you would call it duty." The counselor had ended the interview shortly after that. The concept of deliberately sacrificing oneself for others was so alien to galactic civilization that most species couldn't even understand it. Now, 50 years later, Saul wondered what would happen when that concept met the harvester machines. On the Trade Federation ship near the galactic rim, Kang was running calculations. The data analyst was good with numbers, and the numbers about humans were disturbing. Their first contact record showed humans who could survive injuries that would kill 3 other species. They healed faster than any known biology should allow. They could function in environments that would be lethal to most civilized beings, but that wasn't what worried Kang. What worried him was their technology. The human ships that had brought their delegation were primitive by galactic standards, but they were built differently than anything in known space. Where most species built elegant, efficient vessels optimized for speed and comfort, humans built their ships like fortresses. Their hulls were thick enough to stop weapons that could pierce normal starship armor. Their engines were overpowered, built to work even when damaged. Everything about their technology suggested a species that expected to be shot at regularly. What kind of beings build their civilian ships to survive military attacks? Kang muttered to himself. The answer, he suspected, was beings who lived on a world where everything was a military attack. As reports came in about the human fleet heading toward Volani space, the galaxy watched with a mixture of curiosity and terror. No one had ever seen humans at war. They had only seen humans at peace, and that had been frightening. Enough. Now they were about to witness what the Deathworlders did when someone threatened innocent people. The universe was about to learn why evolution had made humans into monsters, and why sometimes monsters were exactly what you needed. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Volani system, like a pack of predators arriving at a kill. Admiral Min stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the tactical displays update as her ships took position. The fleet was not beautiful. Where other species built elegant vessels that looked like works of art, human ships looked like they were designed for war. The hulls were thick and angular, covered in armor plating that showed the scars of previous battles. Weapons bristled from every surface, and the engines glowed with barely contained power. Sensors are picking up massive activity around the planet, reported Lieutenant High from her station. She was the youngest officer on the bridge, fresh from the academy, but her voice was steady. Multiple artificial constructs. They're tearing the planet apart. Admiral Min studied the display. The harvester machines were everywhere, swarming across the surface of Kasara Prime like metal parasites. The beautiful crystal cities that the Volani had built over thousands of years were being systematically destroyed and consumed. "Captain Day," Min called to her Special Forces commander. "Analysis?" Captain Day was a compact man with hard eyes and hands marked by old scars. He had seen action against space pirates, rogue AI systems, and worse things that lurked in the dark between stars. He studied the tactical readout with professional interest. "Classic swarm pattern," he said. "Harvesters work like army ants. The small drones cut everything into pieces, the medium units process the materials, and the large factory ships turn it all into new machines. They're not particularly smart individually, but they're effective in groups. Weaknesses? They're machines. They follow programming, not instinct. They can't adapt to tactics they haven't seen before." Dee smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Lucky for us, they've never seen human tactics." Dr. Jun looked up from her xenobiology station. She was the fleet's expert on alien species and first contact protocols. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the planet. The locals are trying to establish communication. Put it through." The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a Volani. Admiral Min had read the files on the species, but seeing one in person was still jarring. The creature was impossibly tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large eyes that showed too much white. It looked fragile, like something that might break if you touched it too hard. "Please," the Volani said in heavily accented galactic standard. "Are you the humans? We sent the distress call. We need help." Admiral Min stepped forward. Her translator was working, but she knew that some concepts didn't translate well between species. "I am Admiral Min of the Earth Defense Fleet. We received your message. What is your situation?" "Our defenses have failed. The machines are destroying everything. Our people are trapped in the central cities. We have maybe hours before." The transmission broke up as something exploded in the background. "We understand," Min said calmly. "We're here to help, but you need to know. Our methods might seem strange to you. We're going to do things that other species might consider extreme." The Volani's eyes grew even wider, if that was possible. "Extreme how?" Dr. Jun leaned forward. "Your people are peaceful, correct? You've never fought a war?" "No. We don't understand war. We build things, create beauty, share knowledge. We don't know how to fight." Captain Day snorted. "Well, you're about to get a lesson." Admiral Min shot him a warning look, then turned back to the screen. "We're going to save your people, but you need to trust us. Can you do that?" The Volani nodded desperately. "Yes, anything. Just please help us." "Good. Keep your people in the central areas. Don't try to evacuate during the fighting. You'll only get in the way. We'll handle the machines." The transmission ended, and Min turned to her officers. "Tactical assessment. Approximately 12,000 harvester units on the surface," Lieutenant High reported. 6 major factory ships in orbit plus support vessels. They're using standard consumption patterns. They're not expecting resistance. They're about to get some, Captain Day said grimly. Admiral Min studied the display for a moment longer. The harvesters had surrounded the planet like a metal cage, systematically breaking it down piece by piece. It was efficient, methodical, and completely predictable. Dr. Jun, what do we know about harvester programming? They're designed to optimize resource collection. They avoid unnecessary conflict because fighting damages valuable materials. If they encounter resistance, they're programmed to use minimum force necessary to eliminate the threat. So they're used to fighting species that think logically. Exactly. Most civilized species try to minimize casualties and preserve infrastructure. The harvesters are programmed to counter those tactics. Admiral Min smiled. It was not a nice smile. Then they're in for a surprise. Lieutenant Hai, signal the fleet. Battle stations. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship. All around the fleet, human vessels powered up their weapons and prepared for war. The crews moved with practiced efficiency, each person knowing exactly what to do. Captain Day, Min, said, "You're taking the ground teams down once we clear a path. Your mission is to protect the civilian population and destroy any harvesters in the cities." Understood. What about the factory ships? Leave those to us. Min turned to the main display. All ships, this is Admiral Min. We have civilians on the ground and hostile machines in orbit. Our job is simple. Kill every harvester in this system and get these people to safety. She paused, looking at the tactical display one more time. 12,000 enemy units against a human fleet of 30 ships. In normal galactic warfare, it would be considered a hopeless battle. But humans didn't fight normal galactic warfare. Remember, she continued, harvesters are machines. They think like machines. They expect us to act rationally, to preserve our ships and minimize our losses. They expect us to fight like civilized beings. Around the fleet, human crews checked their weapons and prepared for battle. Many of them were veterans of the Outer Rim conflicts, where they had fought pirates, rogue AI, and things that were even worse. They had learned to fight in environments that would kill other species against enemies that showed no mercy. But we're not civilized, Admiral Min said quietly. We're humans. And these machines just made the mistake of threatening innocent people in front of us. The harvesters detected the human fleet's approach and began repositioning to defend their operation. Their movements were precise and logical, designed to maximize their defensive capabilities while minimizing resource expenditure. They had no idea they were about to face an enemy that considered resource expenditure irrelevant when innocent lives were at stake. All ships, Admiral Min commanded. Attack formation. Show these machines what Deathworlders do when someone hurts the helpless. The human fleet moved forward, and the battle for Kasara Prime began. The first wave of human fighters screamed toward the harvester formation like bullets fired from the void. Captain Jin led her squadron in a maneuver that would have terrified any sane pilot, a direct attack run through the enemy fleet's heaviest defenses. Phoenix Squadron. This is Phoenix Leader, Jin called over the comm. Target the factory ships. Remember, we're not trying to be clever here. We're trying to be effective. The harvesters responded exactly as their programming dictated. They formed defensive patterns designed to minimize damage while maximizing their ability to destroy attackers with concentrated fire. It was a logical, efficient response. It was also exactly what the humans were counting on. Phoenix 2, Phoenix 3, break left and draw their fire, Jin ordered. Phoenix 4 through 8, follow me. We're going in. What happened next violated every principle of civilized warfare. Instead of trying to avoid the harvester weapons, Jin's fighters flew straight into them. The human ships were built to take damage, with armor thick enough to survive hits that would vaporize normal fighters. As the harvesters concentrated their fire on the attacking squadrons, they left their flanks exposed. Admiral Min watched from her flagship as the first fighters reached the enemy lines. Dr. Jun, are you recording this? Yes, Admiral. For the historical record. Good. The galaxy needs to see what happens when you threaten our friends. On the surface of Kasara Prime, the Villani watched in horror as the human fighters punched through the harvester defenses. To them, it looked like suicide. The small human ships were taking massive damage, losing pieces of hull and trailing smoke and fire. but they kept flying. "They're going to die," Nari whispered from her position in the council chamber. "They're all going to die trying to save us." "No," Juan said quietly. He was beginning to understand something about humans. "They're not trying to die. They're trying to win. There's a difference." Captain Jin's fighter took a direct hit that tore away half her wing. Any other species would have retreated for repairs. Instead, she accelerated toward the nearest factory ship. "Phoenix leader to all units," she called. "I'm going in. If my ship doesn't make it out, tell my family I did my job." "Negative, Phoenix leader," came a voice from her squadron. "You're not doing this alone. Phoenix 5 and 6 forming up on you." 3 human fighters, all damaged, all trailing fire, dove toward the massive harvester factory ship. The enemy vessel tried to shoot them down, but the humans were moving too fast and too unpredictably. At the last second, they released their payloads directly into the factory ship's hull and pulled away. The explosion lit up space like a new star. On Admiral Min's ship, Lieutenant Hai was staring at her instruments in disbelief. "Admiral, Phoenix Squadron just destroyed a factory ship with 3 fighters. The mathematics say that's impossible." "The mathematics never met humans," Admiral Min replied calmly. "Captain Day, you're clear for ground assault. Get down there and protect those civilians." Captain Day's Marines were already loaded into their dropships when the order came. Unlike the elegant transport vessels used by other species, human dropships were flying tanks designed to punch through enemy defenses and deliver troops directly to the battlefield. "Listen up," Day told his Marines as their ships launched toward the planet. "The locals are peaceful. They don't know how to fight, and they're counting on us to keep them alive. The enemy is machines, no mercy, no negotiation, just programming. Our job is to get between the machines and the civilians and hold the line until the fleet clears orbit." The dropships hit the atmosphere like meteors, their heat shields glowing white-hot as they punched through the air. Harvester drones immediately moved to intercept them, but the ships were built to survive atmospheric entry under fire. Sergeant Wu, leading the first ground team, watched the tactical display as his ship approached the landing zone. "Looks like we've got company waiting for us," he called to his squad. 15, maybe 20 drones in the immediate area." "Copy that, Sergeant," came the reply from his team. "Standard anti-machine protocols?" "Affirmative. Remember, these things are programmed to fight logical opponents, so don't be logical." The dropship slammed into the ground hard enough to crack the landing pad. Before the dust had settled, the Marines were already moving out, their weapons ready. The harvester drones were waiting for them, just as expected. What the drones weren't expecting was the way the humans fought. Instead of taking cover and engaging in a prolonged firefight, the Marines charged directly at the enemy positions. They used explosives not as weapons of last resort but as primary tools. When their guns ran out of ammunition, they switched to backup weapons. When those ran out, they used their tools as clubs. Sergeant Wu's team reached the first group of Villani civilians within minutes. The aliens were huddled in what had once been a beautiful garden, now torn apart by the harvester drones. They looked up at the armored humans with a mixture of hope and terror. "We're here to help," Wu said, his translator converting his words into Villani. "Stay close to us. We're going to get you to safety." One of the Villani, an elderly male with pale blue skin marked by age, stared at the human sergeant. "You're really going to protect us?" "That's what we do," Wu replied simply. As if to prove his point, a harvester drone chose that moment to attack. The machine was the size of a building, with cutting arms that could slice through steel. It moved toward the group of civilians with mechanical precision. Sergeant Wu stepped between the machine and the Villani. The drone's sensors registered the human and calculated threat levels. One small organic being against a machine designed to process entire buildings. The outcome should have been obvious. It fired its cutting beam at Wu. The sergeant dodged, rolled, and came up running directly at the machine. His rifle spoke once, twice, targeting the drone's sensor array. The machine reeled back, momentarily blinded, and Wu used the opening to plant an explosive charge on its central processing unit. The explosion knocked him backward, but when the smoke cleared, the drone was scrap metal. "Impossible," whispered one of the Villani. "It was 10 times your size." "Size doesn't matter," Wu said, helping the alien to his feet. "What matters is knowing what you're fighting for." Across the planet, similar scenes were playing out. Human Marines were engaging harvester forces in close combat, using tactics that violated every principle of logical warfare. They fought harder when they were wounded, became more dangerous when their situation grew desperate, and seemed to have no concept of acceptable losses when civilian lives were at stake. In orbit, the space battle was reaching its climax. The human fleet had taken heavy casualties, but they had also destroyed 4 of the 6 Harvester factory ships. The remaining machines were trying to retreat and regroup, but Admiral Min wasn't letting them escape. "All ships pursue and destroy," she ordered. "Don't let a single machine leave this system." "Admiral," Dr. Jun said quietly, "we've lost almost half the fleet. By any reasonable measure, we should withdraw and call for reinforcements." Admiral Min looked at the tactical display, showing the scattered human ships still fighting against overwhelming odds. Then she looked at the planet below, where her Marines were protecting innocent civilians with their lives. "Dr. Jun," she said, "when has humanity ever done the reasonable thing?" The final Harvester factory ships were desperately trying to escape when Captain Jin's reformed squadron caught up with them. Her fighter was held together with emergency repairs and determination, but she still had weapons and the will to use them. "All right, people," she called to her surviving pilots. "One more time. Let's show these machines what humans do when someone threatens our friends." The last of the Phoenix Squadron dove toward the enemy ships, their damaged fighters moving like wounded predators going in for the kill. Behind them, the planet Kasara Prime was safe, its people protected by beings who had come from the darkest corner of the galaxy to stand between the innocent and the dark. The Harvesters had made a simple mistake. They had attacked defenseless people in front of humans, and humans never forgave that kind of mistake. The silence after the battle was almost as unsettling as the fighting had been. Kasara Prime's orbit was filled with the wreckage of Harvester machines, their metal corpses drifting in the void like mechanical ghosts. The human fleet hung in space around them, battered and scarred but victorious. Admiral Min stood in her flagship's medical bay looking at the casualty reports. 14 ships lost, over 3,000 human lives ended, another 1,000 wounded. By the standards of galactic warfare, it was a disaster. By human standards, it was Tuesday. "Admiral," Dr. Jun approached with her datapad, "the Villani are requesting permission to come aboard. They want to thank us," Min nodded tiredly. "Send them to conference room 3, and Jun, make sure they understand that what they saw today was not unusual for us. This is what we do." On the planet's surface, Sergeant Wu was helping to clear the last of the Harvester debris from the civilian shelters. The Villani watched him work with expressions of awe and confusion. Several times they had tried to help, but their fragile bodies couldn't handle the heavy lifting that Wu did without thinking. "Sergeant," one of the Villani approached him. It was the elderly male from the garden, the one who had asked if the humans would really protect them. "I wanted to say, thank you. You saved our lives." Wu paused in his work, looking at the alien with tired eyes. "Just doing our job. But you lost so many of your people. So many died for us. How do we repay that?" The question seemed to confuse Wu. "Repay? You don't repay it. You just live good lives. Be kind to each other. Make your world beautiful again. That's payment enough." The Villani stared at him. "You really mean that, don't you?" "Yeah, we didn't come here for payment. We came because you needed help." An hour later, a small delegation of Villani stood in the conference room of Admiral Min's flagship. High Counselor Huan led the group with Nari and Tai beside him. They looked around the room with wide eyes, taking in the utilitarian design and the scars on the walls from previous battles. "Admiral Min," Huan began formally, "on behalf of all Villani, I want to thank you. You saved our world. You saved our people. Many of you died for us, complete strangers. We don't understand why you would do such a thing." Admiral Min studied the alien delegation. They were so different from humans. Tall, fragile, built for creating beauty rather than surviving horror. "Counselor Huan, can I ask you something? When you sent out that distress call, who did you expect to answer? The Alturian Republic, perhaps? The Crystalline Collective, civilized species who might have resources to spare for humanitarian aid. And if they had come, what would they have done?" Huan thought about it. They would have negotiated with the Harvesters, perhaps. Tried to find a peaceful solution. If that failed, they might have offered to evacuate some of our people to safety. But they wouldn't have fought. Fighting is unthinkable to most civilized species. The cost in lives, in resources, in suffering, it's too high. Better to save who you can and accept the losses. Admiral Min nodded slowly. That's the difference between us and them, counselor. You're right. We're not civilized. We're something else, Dr. June stepped forward. What the Admiral means is that humans evolved differently. Our world taught us that sometimes the only way to protect innocent life is to be willing to sacrifice your own. But why? Nari asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why would you risk everything for people you've never met? The question hung in the air for a long moment. Finally, Admiral Min spoke. Because it's right. Because someone has to. Because if we don't stand up for those who can't protect themselves, who will? She walked to the window that looked out at the planet below. Our world tried to kill us every day for millions of years. Ice ages, volcanoes, earthquakes, predators, diseases. Everything wanted us dead. We could have become paranoid, aggressive, violent toward everyone. Instead, we learned something else. What? Juan asked. We learned that the strong protect the weak. We learned that you never leave anyone behind. We learned that some things are worth dying for. She turned back to the Villani delegation. You call us monsters because we're willing to fight and die. Maybe you're right. But sometimes the galaxy needs monsters. Tay, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. What happens now? The galaxy will know what you did here. They'll know that humans are willing to fight wars for strangers. Let them know, Admiral Min said simply. Maybe some of them will remember that when the next crisis comes. Dr. Jun activated her communication console. Admiral, we're receiving priority messages from across the galaxy. News of the battle is spreading. The main screen lit up with incoming transmissions. Admiral Min read through them quickly, her expression growing more thoughtful with each message. The Altrurian Republic wants to know if we're available for security consultation, she read aloud. The Crystalline Collective is asking about mutual defense agreements. The Trade Federation wants to discuss protection services. It seems the galaxy has suddenly discovered that they need us. Will you help them? Juan asked. If they need help and if they ask nicely. Min smiled grimly. But they need to understand something first. We're not mercenaries. We're not conquerors. We're guardians. We protect those who can't protect themselves, not because we expect payment, but because it's right. She turned to look out at the stars. The universe is a dangerous place, counselor. It's full of things like the harvesters, things that consume and destroy without mercy or reason. Most species try to hide from those dangers, try to avoid them or negotiate with them. And humans? Humans hunt them. As the meeting continued, news of the battle spread throughout the galaxy. On peaceful worlds across the stars, civilized species watched the recordings of human fighters deliberately flying into enemy fire to protect strangers. They saw Marines charging machine guns to save civilians they had never met. They witnessed an entire fleet sacrifice almost half its numbers for people they owed nothing to. Some species were horrified. Others were awed. All of them were forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the Deathworlders from the quarantine zone. Ambassador Kim, Earth's new representative to the Galactic Council, would arrive 6 months later with a simple message. You wanted to know what humans are. Now you know. We're the people who answer the call when innocents are dying. We're the ones who stand between the darkness and the light. We're your monsters if you'll have us. The galaxy's response was swift and unanimous. Within a year, human fleets were patrolling the dark spaces between the stars, hunting the things that hunted others. They established bases in the dangerous sectors, the places where other species feared to go. They became the galaxy's first line of defense against the horrors that lurked in the void. The Villani, grateful beyond words, became humanity's first true allies. They served as cultural ambassadors, helping other species understand these strange Deathworlders who fought not for conquest, but for compassion. High Counselor Juan would later write in his memoirs, "We called for salvation and instead summoned monsters. But they were our monsters and they stood between us and the dark. Sometimes that makes all the difference." In the end, the galaxy learned that the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their capacity for violence. It was their capacity for love. Love so fierce that they would die for complete strangers. Love so strong that they would face any horror to protect the innocent. The Deathworlders had found their place in the universe. They were the guardians at the gates, the watchers in the dark, the ones who answered when help was needed, and the galaxy was safer for it.